Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Common Sense Sports. Um, in this channel, I'll kind of just be looking at sports and giving my thoughts. I spend way too much time watching, analyzing, and trying to understand sports to not produce anything, I think. And especially over the pandemic, I've kind of dove into it as there's not as much else to do as there usually is. So with that in mind, let's start. So obviously, I'll be looking at the Lakers off season so far. What I like, don't like, things I would do differently, maybe, and what they can still do with the remaining, you know, draft slots, minimum contracts, and potentially even a trade. All right. So to start, you can't talk about the Lakers offseason without talking about the big splash they made at the start, trading for Russell Westbrook. Now, I'm a little mixed on this trade. Um, Obviously the Lakers decided they wanted to go for a superstar, or really a star, and KCP is a great role player. He's not a star. Kuzma is a solid role player. He's not a star. The 22nd pick has some value, but like you're not gonna get a year one player out of that pick probably, who's gonna provide like really good value. And then Trez, you know, he's a good regular season player. Now, Russell Westbrook is a massive contract. I think he's getting paid like 90 million over the next 2 years, probably even a little bit more. I think it's like 91 or 93. And to be perfectly honest, I think the Lakers overpaid for him. I can understand why they did the move. And, if you're thinking, we want Russ, you kind of deal with everything else later. But I don't even know if Russell Westbrook had positive value with his contract and his horrible recent playoff production. Now, on a team with LeBron and Anthony Davis, I don't think Westbrook's playoffs are going to be, you know, I think that we can see something different. He's super athletic still. He's a great on ball defender. And, he's been kind of hampered by injuries a lot lately that he's played through. And, you know, he's looked really bad because of those injuries. But, at the end of the year last year, he went on a tear and, he made his team better, at least in the regular season. So, yeah, KCP, we're going to miss him, right? He's an elite off ball, run around screens kind of defender. He's a legitimate spacer. He can guard ones and twos. And, even though he's a horrible finisher, he's so important to this team because you don't find many guys with his specific skill set on defense who can provide adequate offense. And I know he was really poor in the playoffs, at least offensively. On defense, he was still great, but you know that's going to be a tough loss. Kuzma, you know, obviously as we'll see, they kind of make up for it. But Kuzma's the last, young Laker with like a some potential left. I mean, that's not true, but he's the last guy from the the Lonzo era, and it's tough to see him go because he's totally transformed his game to become an actual effective role player around LeBron and Anthony Davis, and you know his analytics were awful this year, but the skills are developing, and if you look closely, you can see him improving. He knows the right place to put his feet, the right kind of jump shot form to take. He knows like which whether he wants to do the 1-2 step, the hop step, catch and shoot. He still doesn't have a great shot quality. I don't think he's good at getting open off ball, but he's not really just a stationary shooter like you see with a bunch of other guys. When he's open, he's a good shooter, but he doesn't take great shots despite being on a team that should be able to get him open shots. Um, but it's going to be tough to lose Kuzma. But at the end of the day, you can say all you want about this trade. You're getting Russell Westbrook back, and Kuzma's a replaceable player. And as we'll see, I think Lakers did a pretty good job to replace him. Now, next move that's kind of very important, Alex Caruso. You can't lose him. The two most important guys in the Lakers offseason were Alex Caruso and Taylor Horton Tucker, because those were the last two assets you have. Alex Caruso is, in my opinion, the best defender in the NBA, and we saw it last season. He was one of the reasons the Lakers defense was so great and why it was only going to get better in the playoffs. You know, and obviously, some tactical things and injuries stopped the Lakers from actually playing up to their potential in the playoffs or anywhere close to it. But he's an above the rim finisher when he needs to be. He's a okay shooter. I know he shot 40%, but that's just because he had super easy shots. But like, he's good enough. He's a good enough shooter. If you have players who can shoot around him, he's a good enough shooter. He can kind of space the floor, and he can play elite defense. He's a poor offensive player, but especially with that great synergy he had with LeBron, it's really tough to see him go, and it's even tougher if it's just because of cap space and luxury tax. Not cap space, because they have full board rights, and with Russell, AD, and LeBron, you're going to be over the hard cap. So it's pretty inexcusable for Jeanie Buss. I know I know the Buss family, all they do is the Lakers. They're not as rich as other owners. They might even be the poorest ownership group in the NBA. But we haven't played the luxury tax in 10 years. You are the premier franchise in the NBA. Maybe not in value, although maybe yes in value with the recent sale. And you're, right now the Vegas favorite to win the title. So it's not like you're a pseudo pretender like the Jazz or like, I don't know, some other team. But the Lakers could win the title, and they also couldn't. And Alex Caruso could be the reason they do not win, losing him, because you have to deal with the Nets, and they have a bunch of elite guards who are great in ISO, and you're losing out on one of the best guard defenders. So it's tough. Now THT, the market kind of dried up for him a little bit. I think Lakers fans and GMs value THT and honestly Alex Caruso more than the average fan does. THT has a lot of great stuff. He's only like 20 or 21. He's not fantastic. He's a very solid on ball defender. He's very fluid. He has super long arms. He weighs over 230 pounds, so he can guard wings, in my opinion. 7'1" wingspan. One of the best drivers and finishers in the game for someone his size. And his free throw motion has some. He looks fluid. He looks like he could potentially develop a real shot. Now he obviously has limitations. He's poor off ball. He doesn't shoot. Sometimes he tries to do too much. He only seems to shoot layups with his right hand, but he's still a fantastic finisher, so I'm not too worried about that. But getting him for what, like 34, which is just the max they could offer him with early bird rights, or restricted early bird. It's a weird thing, but that's great. No team made the Lakers pay more than they would have needed to. I'm happy with that. And if THT breaks out, that would be great, because he could be a guy you can put on James Harden, and we saw that already. And if he can shoot, you can start him, and that would be amazing. Now, to start off free agency, the Lakers made 3 moves. One of them seemed very predictable. Another one of them was very encouraging, and then the next one really encouraging. So at the start, it was Dwight, Lakers fan favorite, amazing offensive rebounder, maybe the best post defender in the NBA. Legitimate lob threat. His skills have diminished a little bit since he left the Lakers, but he's worth more than the minimum, kinda. I don't know how many teams would have given him more than the minimum, but at a minimum contract, he provides value. And Marc Gasol is a good post defender. He obviously doesn't provide the lob threatness or the offensive rebounding, but he's a much better passer. He's a legitimate post defender too, and he can space the floor. So they have kind of overlapping skill sets based on defense, at least, even though they have very different bodies and levels of athleticism. They're both super super smart, and especially in the regular season, those are two guys who can really just be a great 1-2 center punch with hopefully Anthony Davis playing the rest of the minutes. Wayne Ellington was the next signing. Very encouraging. One of the best shooters in the league. Poor defender, but he has such great footwork to get open. He's not a guy who're just gonna like leave in the corner and he's gonna shoot like 40 something percent. He's gonna be running around, JJ Redick, Kyle Korver style, top of the key, any part, going behind screens, ghost actions, and just doing the right thing to get open. And even if he misses some shots, which he doesn't do that often, he's going to make the right play off ball. Yeah, as I'm doing this, I just got a thing that said the Hornets have emerged with strong interest for Lauri Markkanen, so that could be cool. But yeah, and then last, Trevor Ariza. Now there's been a lot of rumors that that the Lakers and Rudy Gay had a lot of mutual interest for a minimum contract. I wouldn't mind this. I think Rudy Gay's a great player, or a solid player, and it would have been a really good guy for the minimum. But the reason why Trevor Ariza was so encouraging is because Trevor Ariza is a legitimate small forward. Rudy Gay at this point is really a power forward, and that's what LeBron plays. And if you're the Lakers, you want to save LeBron's legs, and you want to put him in the best role. LeBron is best as like a help defending power forward, and signing Rudy Gay is so encouraging because it means that you have another small forward, an actual small forward who can play small forward, kind of shoot, play very solid defense, and keep LeBron fresh and keep the Lakers defense optimized. Now, unfortunately, right after this Ariza move, you got Alex Caruso going to the Bulls. So it was like this, elation for wow, the Lakers are really going in the right direction, and then just all of it just goes away because Alex Caruso is more important than all of these guys. Um, you know, and if it's just luxury tax, like it's so brutal. But then you know, not quite at the level of Caruso, but pretty soon after, the Lakers signed Kent Bazemore for a minimum, and that's amazing. He's a great player. He's a borderline all defense caliber defender. He can shoot. He's a solid shooter. I think he's a decent shooter. I think he shot like 40 something percent, low 40s, on pretty decent looks. But like he's a good shooter. He's a better shooter than Caruso. He's not quite the defender, and he doesn't. We don't know what his synergy is with LeBron. Fun story about Kent Bazemore. He actually go through his old Twitter account, if those tweets are still up, and look what he said about LeBron. Look up the LeBron and Kent Bazemore beef. I mean, it's very one-sided, but it's very funny. Kent Bazemore just seems to hate LeBron. But I mean, it's a great signing, and maybe it's only made possible by Caruso leaving, knowing that there's like that open spot at the two. So we know Bazemore got more money elsewhere. I think the Warriors even offered him like their MLE or something. But on the Lakers, he is a guy who I absolutely trust in the playoffs in a closing lineup, and he will almost definitely be there. Next, you got I think the next signing was the Carmelo signing. That's fine. I mean, Melo's a good shooter. He's gotten better the last 2 years. I expect him to improve again. But he's horrible on defense, and he's a legitimate power forward. Like, it doesn't really make sense from a basketball perspective, but Melo's he's beloved. I mean, he was honestly my favorite. He was probably my first favorite player in the NBA. Watching him on the Knicks, just that 62-point game against the Hornets, and Michael Kidd Gilchrist just couldn't stop him. Like Melo's a baller. Everyone loves him, but he's also overrated, and he's probably not going to be a positive contributor overall. But he can shoot, and I don't think the Lakers are done upgrading at backup power forward. And then next, Malik Monk, very solid signing. I mean, he's also a very bad defender, better than Melo, but he's also young, and he is trending in the right direction. He just had his best season of his career. The Hornets had to let him go for like weird reasons. They have Rozier, LaMelo. They just traded like Devonte Graham to the Pelicans in a super weird move, which I'll get into in some other video. But Monk is a legitimate shooter. He's very good. He can create a little bit. He's athletic. I don't think he's a good finisher yet. I'd have to look into him a little bit more. But he's not the kind of guy you expect to get for a minimum deal because he's young and he's going to want his minutes. Um, Hopefully, Frank Vogel can cover him a little bit on defense. I'm a little critical of Vogel based on last year's performance in games 4, 5, 6, and honestly, one against the Suns. But, you know, who knows? We'll see. I think at the very minimum, Malik Monk is a guy who will play well in the regular season. I don't know if I can trust him enough on defense to be a playoff guy, but maybe he could be if he can develop a little bit more, get better on offense, and somehow develop on defense. I don't know what his exact frame is like. I know he's skinny. I know he's athletic. I don't know what his lateral defense is. I haven't looked at that enough. I don't know exactly how quick he processes the game. I know he's a big guy in like the ball is life sphere, so he's like a hooper, but he might also be an effective player, and especially in the regular season, I expect him to be good. Um, and that last signing, Kendrick Nunn for the TPMLA. Now, this happened not too long after Patty Mills decided to sign with the Nets. And honestly, I'm happy for it. I think Nunn is a good player. He's made some changes in his shot mechanics to improve what was already a decent shot. Good, quick, fluid release. Average defender. He's not good, but losing Caruso hurts so much because a lot of what you could do is just put an average or poor defender next to Caruso, and just Caruso makes them look good. But Kendrick Nunn, he's a guy who can play in the playoffs. He's 6'2", so it's going to be tough against some teams, a lot of teams. But I assume he'd be playing like a point guard defensively, even though he's kind of a shooting guard on offense. And he's an average defender. Honestly, considering he's a guard, having an average defender means you're probably slightly above average. And he's improving. I assume he's a hard worker. Undrafted guy, was like third in rookie of the year. Then he gets benched in the playoffs, and he's fought back. He's played so hard, and he's making improvements. So yeah, and then with Patty Mills, who was the guy the Lakers were really going after, he's 5'11". He's still a great shooter, but last year he really fell off a lot skill wise. And I know it's tough to say that watching like the Olympics where he's just going off, but it's a little different facing an NBA defense, especially in the playoffs. And I expect Patty Mills' skills to diminish a bunch. And I honestly didn't consider him a guy who could play defensively against like a Nets lineup, because if you put a poor guard defender out there, Kyrie Irving, James Harden will eat you alive. And that's really the team the Lakers have to worry about right now. I mean, if Kawhi is back, I don't know who I'd have as a favorite, Lakers or Clippers, but you know, with Kendrick Nunn at the very least, you can probably trust him in a closing lineup. Now, I'll just very quickly talk about some of the guys who I wanted to get who we didn't get. Otto Porter Jr. was at the top of my list. He's a great player. Had some injury concerns, but he's a shooter. He can facilitate a little bit. He can play solid defense at both wing positions. And the Warriors got him for the minimum, which is kind of crazy. I expected him to get maybe even up to like a 4-year, $80 million deal. I thought he was going to get real money, and he didn't. And he's going to start for the Warriors, and he's going to be great when he plays. And the Otto Porter Jr. deal has kind of put the Warriors back on the map as contenders. Clay hasn't played in a while. Draymond is getting worse every year. Steph is still a tier 1 superstar in my opinion. But they have Otto. That's a great signing. Next guy, Nick Batum. I know that the first year of the contract had like some offset language, so signing the minimum versus signing like anything under what they stretched him for was, I don't think it mattered. But years 2 and 3, I don't think they have that same offset language. So I don't know. He signed like 2 years, like 6.3 with the Clippers, and I just don't get it from his perspective. I guess if he's that happy, great, but he definitely had more of a market because there weren't injury concerns with Batum at least last season. He basically played the whole year and he was great. Um, Now the fact that the Clippers had such great spacing made him look like a better shooter than he was, but he can shoot. He's a solid shooter. I'd say he's about on Ariza's level in terms of shot making ability. But we'll see. He's a good player, and for the minimum, that's kind of crazy. Um, I really like Terrence Davis. He's kind of like a guard wing. He's a little light to be a wing, but he kind of has a toughness and a strength about him. The Kings got him for 2 years, 8 million. I don't really know why the whole league is kind of down on him, but I think he's a very underrated player, and I would not be surprised if he gets moved at the deadline for maybe even up to like a first round pick. Um, yeah. All right. Guys who I want the Lakers to target still. I think they should re-sign Wesley Matthews. He wants to come back for a minimum, and he's and especially with this current roster, we'd actually be able to slot him in correctly as a small forward. Um, I'd like to see Paul Millsap maybe. He's a legit power forward. He fell off a lot last year, but he's one of my favorite players. Legit shooter, legit defender, and he kind of steps up his game in the playoffs. I'd like to see James Ennis. The Lakers are kind of at the point in free agency where you just have to throw some flyers out there, and Ennis had a great season last year. The reason why he doesn't have more interest is because it looks like it could have just been a one-off situation. Um, you know, but if James Ennis can be as good this year as he was last year, he is 100% a guy you can play, game 6 of the finals, your final lineup. And that sounds so weird to say, but he was very good as a 3 and D guy last year. So if the Lakers can get him back for a minimum, that would be great. And the last guy, and he at this point barely fits on the roster, is JJ Redick. I mean, if you can get him for a minimum, why not? He's a legit shooter. Those guys always seem to help. I'd probably trust him more in the playoffs than like Monk or maybe some other or like Ellington. But Redick has his skills have diminished a lot too. His year looks worse than it really is because he played poorly at the start, but by the end you saw the real JJ Redick. But there's so many guards on the roster. Actually, really quickly, I'm going to talk about their undrafted free agent signings. Jay Ajayi, Austin Reeves, and Mac McClung. Now the ball, the whole hoop circuit will say Mac McClung is the premier signing there, but he's really not. I could see him in a few years being good, but you know he's a fun guy. He's a fun pick. He's definitely not going to be on this year's roster unless something crazy happens. And I don't see him as a guy who's really going to play any playoff minutes ever for the Lakers. But solid signing. There's no real downside. Next, you have Austin Reeves, a really good undrafted free agent guy, one of the best undrafted free agents left. He's a guard. He can create a little bit. I haven't really looked into him too much, but if the Lakers end up with have a lot of guards, but I could definitely see a situation, if a couple guards go down where they bring up Austin Reeves, at the mid-season, put him on the 15-man roster, and just see what happens. And then finally, the big guy, Ajayi, I hope that's how you pronounce it. Great offseason. Maybe the best undrafted free agent there was. I saw a lot of people had him as a first round pick. Some of the advanced stats out there have him as one of the most productive players in college. Makes his team better. Um, you know, he can shoot, he can create, he can operate out of the pick and roll. He's decent off ball. He's a defender. I'm not saying he's great on defense, and I don't know how it translates to an NBA level. I'm not quite that right. I'm not there as an analyst yet to really say that, but like a Yai could legitimately make the roster and be solid. Like he could be the like he could be the like Malcolm Brogdon of this year, except for he wasn't drafted. And once he felt the rumors that once he got past the 40th pick, he and his agent like made sure that he wasn't drafted somehow. I don't really know what they did, but whatever. Um, so yeah, finally, I have one exciting thing to do. I know I've been kind of railing on the Lakers ownership for letting Caruso go for nothing, but on the off chance that this is part of an ever expanding sign and trade, it's up to 5 teams. My adjusted version makes that 6, but actually takes away one of the teams. So it's easy to throw stones behind a castle. I'm gonna give my own trade that I think would work. So the Lakers would get Westbrook and Joe Ingles, none of those second round picks. The Wizards get Dinwiddie, KCP, Trez, Aaron Holiday, and Isaiah Todd. Pacers receive Isaiah Jackson. Nets receive the same picks they do and the trade exception. Now we get the Bulls to agree to a sign and trade for Caruso, instead of just them signing them with most of their MLE, and we'll throw in the 2028 Wizards second round pick. I think that's enough to do it. This is a pretty routine thing in the NBA. You throw in a second round pick, you change a sign and trade from you make it a outright signing instead of a sign and trade. I mean, you make it a sign and trade instead of an outright signing to create a TPE or put them in a trade or something. And so that works. Then the Jazz will receive Kyle Kuzma and the Lakers 2027 lottery protected first round pick. There's a lot of rumors out there that the Jazz kind of want to move Ingles. Ingles fits well with the Lakers' defensive scheme, in my opinion. I haven't seen too much film on him, but I've heard that he actually can kind of fill in a little bit of what KCP does. Obviously, he's not as athletic, but he has a much bigger body. So I don't like, not that I'm scared of like a Devin Booker, but like I could see Joe Ingles guarding him, kind of. Um, and then, you know, Kuzma, the Jazz are apparently really high in Kuzma. They want an athletic wing defender. Kuzma provides that. He can shoot. I know, a lot of people are lower on him than they should be, but he's a legit player. And they get the 2027 lottery predicted first. So who knows? And then to make this trade work, you need another like million or so in outgoing salary. Whatever the Lakers just sign and trade Dennis. So if any team is over the cap and they want him, they'll get Dennis. The Lakers, probably don't even have to give an extra value, and that'll be good. And yeah, I mean, with the Wizards, they'd probably be even happier to do this because it looks like Kuzma didn't have any takers that made sense as part of this deal, and they wouldn't need to dump Chandler Hutchinson to the Spurs so they can get that pick back. So the Wizards end up with getting back what looks like it's going to be a pretty decent second round pick in 2022. And the only thing that's kind of holding the trade up, in my opinion, is the Nets will have some pushback because if you're the Nets, you don't want to see the Lakers get better. They're probably the team you're most scared of. But with the 11.45 TPE, there aren't too many players the Nets could realistically get. One way I suspect the Lakers could try and work around this deal is to try and figure out how to get the Pacers to also throw in Jeremy Lamb, who's getting paid like just under the TPE, and maybe the Lakers even give like some second round pick to the Pacers to make it happen, and the Nets also have to give add to it. But I don't think this is actually necessary because one thing the Lakers could just do is instead of getting Joe Ingles in this trade, they can put Caruso and Casey and Schroeder in the trade and just get Kuzma back. They get they still have some picks, and then they can use the picks and the first rounder to get Ingles separately, and I think that's also possible. But yeah, I think that could be a really good deal. It's a home run. It could be great, and I think if they make the move, I would not comfortably, but I would have the Lakers as my title favorites. That's it. I can talk about roster fit a little bit later, specific matchups that we'll see, but hopefully you liked this first video. I tried to keep it as short as I could, but I love basketball. I love the NBA, so I get distracted easily. But this will not be the last video. I will hopefully start making like grinding out some videos for this channel, and I look forward to people seeing it. Hope you enjoy. Bye.